Hello and welcome back to the UBF podcast. I'm Abs.
I'm Thomas, and for the first time in the UBF history, we have two guests back to back. I'm joined by the lovely Catherine Cannuli. Catherine, how are you?
Very well, thank you, Thomas.
Good. We got some history here, Catherine.
We sure do. We do have a lot of history. Let's see if a bit of that history comes out tonight on the podcast.
What's it like working with Thomas?
How long did you say we had on this podcast? 1 hour?
1 hour.
Yeah, not enough time.
Not enough time
to talk about Thomas.
Are they positive things, Catherine, or?
Well, it just depends whether we're talking about him on the field or off the field, sideline coaching. Look, we could go on for
hours
a little while.
And hours, yeah.
But let's just stick to the
script, I think.
Let's
stick to the script.
Let's stick to football. Well, let's kick it off with the Wanderers versus Western United, the Liberty A-League, 3-1. So before we kick off, I do want to wish Hannah Keane a speedy recovery.
All of us.
She had a horrific injury on the weekend. And
what was it, Catherine, you were saying before?
It was I'm pretty sure it's a ruptured patella tendon, I think.
I believe so.
Yeah.
No, wow. Look, it's... they started off well, and it's a shame because she's led a lot of the way for Western United this season.
She's been the biggest player this year.
Yeah, and they've been on top of the table for the best part of all season, except the last 3 weeks after Sydney took over, and she coming back after her loan stint last season's actually played a big part in their rise up the top. And no matter who they've had behind, I've noticed like Amy Medwin's gone from left back to left wing. I think this week she was actually on the right. On the side, Hannah Keane's kind of been that mainstay, and she's led the way for them. But let me just run you through a few stats.
Can I stop you there before? Kat, if you never watched an episode of this podcast, this man is known as a stat man. He's got the most obscure, unique stats you've ever seen in your life. So all the analysis that we do on Monday nights in our meetings with the VOs, this man's got beyond the VO. He's the VO.
Hey, I'll do my research, mate. I'll do my research.
I sort of noticed that when I got the script from you guys, and there was about 49 pages of stats. So I was just making sure that we weren't running across all those stats. I thought I'd be sleeping at the Bella Vista Hotel tonight.
We booked your room just in case.
Yeah, they said there's a bed and a mattress ready to go for you if you need to take a nap.
Abdul, hit it, mate.
But yeah, look, Western United had 10 shots to 2 in that first half alone. Shots on target 5-1. Shem Karmas was forced into 3 saves.
She had a big game.
She had a big game, and she pulled him out of a lot this season. 5 shots blocked by the Wanderers in that first half, and only 1 shot off target for Western United. So outside of the ones blocked and the ones that were saved, they really were on it that first half. Yeah. But ultimately, the score was 1-1 at half time.
Second half, what happened?
Hey, they turned it on. They turned it on, the Wanderers girls. Kushla Roo came on. She absolutely just changed the game.
Have you seen her play, Kath?
Yeah, so I have. I've watched her play this season. She's very rapid. She's quick. It's something that Robbie Hooker's really implemented into his style and his philosophy since taking over the Western Sydney Wanderers. You can see that the girls are a lot more direct, and they're looking to release those wide players and looking to overload in those wide areas, and they're looking to their strength, which is the pace and the strength, especially in those wide areas. Yeah,
no, I agree as well. And when it came to the striker up front, Sophie Harding, the composure she had on those on the finishes, beautiful touch, brought it down, and then just waited for the keeper to commit, and she just hit them both times. I was actually midway through an interview with the daughter and dad, one of the daughter and dad guys, and then you'll see it. I'll just turn around and I'm like, oh, here we go, and she scores it. And I saw I was right behind the goal as well.
I actually did see that on socials. Actually, honestly, you should have got paid for that clip. I thought it was pretty crazy the way that you actually captured that. And just to talk about Sophie Harden, I think she's confidence breeds confidence, and I think she's gone from better to better as the season's gone on as well. And when you start to score goals, especially as a striker and a former striker myself, you get that confidence. And I think also her getting that little bit of a taste of going into the Matildas camp as well. It gives you that little bit of a fire in your belly that normally if you're not getting those opportunities, you might feel a little bit hard done by. But she's been fantastic for the Western Sydney Wanderers this season. Yeah,
and I have to say the one thing I noticed after being at the game and then watching it back, her attacking positioning was elite that game, because I noticed that when Kushla got the ball, she was able to kind of take a step back, put herself back on side, and then peel off the defender just as she crossed the ball in. And she's done it on more than one occasion. So I think, like you said, maybe being in camp with, the elite of Australian women's football has kind of aided to her game and allowed her to kind of take her game to the next level. So what do you think on that?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're going into that Matildas camp now, if you look at the likes of, Caitlin Ford, Steph Catley, Kyra Cooney-Cross, they're all playing at, some of the biggest clubs in the world. So as soon as you step into that camp now, you've got to take your football to another level. We heard Courtney Vine talk about it last week on Dub Zone about, when you do go into those environments, you got no choice but to rise to the cream of the crop, 100%. Which is, and they're all driving the standards. They want every player to come in and to be absolutely flying at every camp, because those standards get driven by the players, and then that's how every player gets better. And I think for the Liberty A-League players to be able to go into camps and then come back and then bring that professionalism and those standards back to the A-League, I think it's even a bigger bonus for us.
Question for you, Abdul, in particular, and Kath. Since the derby, Western Sydney Wanderers have scored 9 goals and conceded only 3 in 4 games. Have they hit a brilliant patch of form, a purple patch, some will call it, just before the final run?
Do you want to answer?
Yeah, well, to be honest,
Sydney FC fan.
Should I give you my answer? Or should I give you Sham Kambas's answer?
Do you want to unbiased? You're going to be unbiased?
Look, I'll be unbiased. I think at the end of the day, that derby, in the fashion that it happened, I think Sydney FC had their way a bit too much with the Wanderers. I think had they actually had their shooting boots on, they would have finished 6-7-0. They had 10 big chances that game. And I'm just talking shots, big chances.
We were there and we saw.
And, whether it was someone like Shem Khamis, for example, because she pulled off quite a few saves that game, turning around, talking to the team, putting a fire, as they say, fire up the belly, if you want to call it that. That's played a big part for me. I think the defensive performance has kind of, as you say, defense starts from the front and everyone's working for the team. So whether it's Kushlaru coming on or, the starting players, Buchanan getting her chance now, everyone's playing for the team. Whether you're getting 80 minutes, 90 minutes, you're getting 20 minutes, they've turned around, they've realised what they have at hand. And now they're no longer just fighting for that 5th or 6th position, they're fighting for a home final. So for me, at the end of the day, I think that FC win, especially at their biggest rival, and props to them over the men's team who have gone completely the other way. They got obliterated and they've just gone downhill ever since. The women's team have had that opposite reaction where they've been able to mentally pick themselves up and just go.
Catherine, thoughts?
Absolutely. I think when you do win games and you do win big games like derbies, it gives you that confidence. You go into the change rooms the next week and all the girls are absolutely buzzing, and that's a key part of any team, not just the Western Sydney Wanderers. And since Robbie Hooker did come in, he did tweak a few things. It takes time. You don't just come in as a coach and then you just think that overnight you're going to be able to turn things around. And I think Robbie's done a fantastic job with that team. I think he's playing to the strengths of the players that he has, and the girls have bought into exactly what he wants to do. And you can see the way that they press now. All the players know their roles and their responsibilities, and they know when they do press high, they're getting rewarded for it. They're winning the ball, and then again, you've got someone like Sophie Harding up top that's taking these opportunities and has been absolutely brilliant in her finishing.
Yeah, and you look at, for example, Vicky Bruce. The whole thing with the red card a few weeks ago and all of that, the kerfuffle that came with that. She's completely turned her performances around. So,
however, that controversy I think would have sparked her into some action.
Yeah.
And I think she's going to carry that on into the final series, because I do think Wanderers will finish possibly in a home final spot.
Yeah. And I think the best way to explain it is it's now looks like it's an us against the world mentality.
Yeah.
And as a team, to come together, to bring a team together, that's probably the best mentality you could have.
Some would say Mourinho masterclass.
Some would say. But given the whole squad's firing, how important do you think it is for those substitute players, for those players that aren't getting the 90 minutes of football, to kind of, play their part and push this team forward?
They're going to play a huge part, because you don't just win games with 11 players, you win with your whole squad. You got injuries, you got sickness. There's so many things that play their part. And I think if the girls want to go on, they need to look to get those 3 points this weekend. And it's important, because not only for them as a team, but for the Wanderers as a club. And everyone knows how passionate I am about the club, and I've been there since day one. But this will be the second time in our history that we've ever made finals. And the last time we done it with a big chunk of international players. Like we had Lynn Williams, Denise O'Sullivan, two of the biggest stars on the world stage at the moment. But if these girls can get this job done and get us to finals with a lot of our local talent, which I think is what I'm most proud of with the team, especially, I think it's going to be a very well-deserved, and it's going to be a massive, massive bonus for the club.
Hopefully it can be at Rudy Hill.
Hopefully.
I do have to say, though, about the club, I think, especially being in and around that women's team lately, it's kind of showed me that they really do represent, and it does emphasise the whole, as Kat called it last week, the melting point of multiculturalism in Sydney. Western Sydney, we have plenty of cultures, plenty of backgrounds, and you look at that team, and whether they're from outback New South Wales or they're from kind of Western Sydney, you've got, bits and pieces from everywhere, and as a fan, you sit there and watch it. I hope they play at a bigger stadium, because you couldn't have fit any more people at Blacktown this last weekend. It's chock-a-block. And I think more people would have shown up, but I think it was 824 people, and the other side you can't sit anywhere. So, I think for me, when it comes to Western Sydney, it's important, especially, for example, I took my sister to a Sydney FC game on the weekend.
The enemy.
But even I want to start taking it to, it's not just Sydney FC.
Yeah.
I want to start taking it out to Blacktown for those type of games. And she saw, for example, Princess Ibini on the weekend. And, I'm from a Lebanese background, and you can kind of pick out which girls are from different backgrounds. And she's like, that's the one she tried looking for her at the end. She finally got her in a car park and got a picture with her. And that's the one player she remembers. And it's kind of like, it makes you think deeper a little bit. It's like the impact these girls have on the younger girls of this younger generation is huge. And representing a different background coming from, different parts of the world plays a bigger part than you think. And yourself coming from an Italian background, how do you think that plays out?
I think it's huge. I think in Western Sydney, we have something that is truly, truly special. We can connect with our fans. We can connect with our community. It's something that you don't get anywhere else around the world. I think Western Sydney Wanderers do have the best fans in the league for that reason, because we are bringing together so many different communities. And obviously I work in the local space as well at Southern Districts Football Association, and I see multiculturalism at its finest, every weekend on the local grounds. And especially this season, we've had an increase of nearly 40% in female participation in the association.
Wow, that's crazy.
And to see young girls of all different backgrounds be able to get out and play football, for me, it's just, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to be able to see it. And, as we know, there's, people of different, there's people with, with money, there's people without money, there's kids at a disadvantage in our region. And, I go out to schools as well, and, we're making sure that all young females in our association are getting the opportunity to be able to, play football no matter what the level is.
That's it. Do you credit that to the Women's World Cup, that increased participation?
100%. 100%.
Excellent.
The Women's World Cup has had an effect not only on female football, but on just football in general. I think participation across all the associations are on a high, and they're up. Everybody's up this year. Yep. I think there's some associations that actually can't even take any more numbers because they don't have enough fields to be able to get the players on the pitch to be able to field games there. So I think football's in a great space post Women's World Cup, and obviously now we're looking to host the Women's Asian Cup as well, which is going to be huge. I think football's in a really, really good space. It's about now with the increases, how do we keep it? Yeah. How do we keep these numbers, and how do we keep growing on these numbers?
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I think it's time we move on to the next game. Sydney FC versus Adelaide United.
See how he smiled, Catherine, when he said Sydney FC?
Look, it finished 3-0, mate. Adelaide had a lot of the ball. They dominated the game. They had a lot of the ball in terms of possession. By halftime, it was about 72%.
Can I give you some breaking news to stop your smile? Canberra United, if you didn't know, beat Sydney FC today, 1-0. Michelle Heyman actually became the outright top scorer ever, so she broke the golden boot, beating Sam Kerr. Yeah. And now it's going to go down to the last match day.
Well, that's fine. That's our second loss in 17 games. Okay. So, the girls have had such a good run of form that I think they can turn around, and that's their game in hand, by the way. It's okay. And they play at Leichhardt Oval this Sunday. So come to Leichhardt.
Tigers, mate.
If a team, we're not like the Tigers, mate. The Tigers get turned over every time they play. So if a team can come to Leichhardt Oval against, 3,500 people on average this season, I'm pretty sure, and beat Sydney FC there, they're every chance of winning it.
Would you be concerned, though, that Adelaide did have 72% of the ball in the first half? Would you be concerned?
Personally, no, because Adelaide, even though they're at the bottom of the table, are a very much more technical team than we all think. If you look at the way they play and the way they set up, it's much more advanced than it looks, because they're trying to hold the ball and possess their way and kind of push up the field, stay there and break you down. The only problem is they played a team that on the counter is probably the best in this country. Yeah,
well, you got the flash on the left and you got the flash to the middle. You can't really.
Yeah, well, you've got Kate, especially with it. Lemon played left back, this game. So he kind of...
Fenton's out, that's why.
Yeah, he moved her off the wing, moved Kaylee Talanhanaka to the right, moved Ibini to the left and Vine down the middle. And they just couldn't handle it because she'd just do what she needed to do. And then when we held the ball, she shifted and inverted into midfield. So
you had a Courtney on the dub zone, didn't you?
Yes, we did. I wasn't on that dub zone, but yeah, we did have.
How was
Courtney.
she? Obviously in and around the studio. How was she?
She was actually only on FaceTime. She wasn't actually in the studio, but it was actually nice to get Courtney out on the dub zone and on FaceTime for all the fans to be able to hear her perspective of what's going on. And it's great to see Courtney in a great space, and she's been doing wonderful things for Sydney FC. She's been absolutely on fire and playing some really good football, and hopefully she can take that into her Matildas camp.
Yeah.
What I really loved was, myself and Abdul spoke about it last week, was Courtney actually said after the World Cup why she stayed is to show female footballers that you can make it big in the A-League. Do you think now with her season that she's had, and hopefully it continues into the finals, do you think there is a move on the cards, possibly?
I'm not sure with Courtney. She decided to stay here post Women's World Cup, and I think for her it just depends on where she's most comfortable playing her football. She's happy at Sydney FC. She's still able to crack into the Matildas camps and into the squads, which is great. I think maybe post Paris, post Olympics, it might be something that if an offer does come up for her, then maybe she might move abroad, but. It's not for everybody. It's not for everyone to move abroad and play overseas. Some people just love to, play their trade in Australia and stay at home and be able to, still be part of those Matilda squads.
Yeah, and she's very much now the big fish in a smaller pond, if you want to call it that, comparing it to the WSL, for example.
Good comparison.
Yeah. I'd stay. I'd stick around because it's growing. And as we saw, for example, like you got people like Kaylee Talanhanaka coming through. She had a debut at the Derby where she won the penalty and
I'm aware, thanks.
And scored the goal to make it 2-0. But the growth in this game, and as I've always said, the development pass in our women's game surpasses the men's game by so far, because we're able to give opportunities to talented 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, whereas on the men's side, the pathways over there is ridiculous. You're still paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000.
It's complicated.
It's complicated on that sense. But keeping it to the women's game, it's much so. If I were Vine, I'd stick her. I'd be the face of this league, and she already is. And through that, you're going to be that one of two or three Matildas that do play in this country. And like I go back to taking my sister there, she, one of the first ones she realized was Courtney Vine. She realized how quick she was. She like the little things like that stick out. And you kind of want to be that inspiration to the little girls in this country, not just on TV.
Sure it is, though.
Yeah.
Sure it is. We done a game. It was Channel 10 was doing a live broadcast. It was Western United versus Sydney FC. And we were trying to do our interviews live on TV. And all you could hear was, Courtney!
Yeah.
Courtney! Like, I'm telling you, about maybe 4,000 or 5,000 girls just screaming her name while we're trying to be live on Channel 10 to try and interview players and to do our post-match analysis. And it was just unbelievable. And that for me, like, I sort of stopped and I took it all in and I was like, wow, the game has just gone to another level. Obviously post-Women's World Cup, and, I never ever thought that I would see what we've seen in Australia, but to see that at a Liberty A-League game, and to see so many girls just waiting afterwards, and Courtney there after doing her interview, doing all her autographs and making sure that, she gets to see all those young fans. I think that's just been a massive turning point for us in our game.
This is going to sound dumb, but she's this country's Samko.
Absolutely. Courtney Vine, being here and scoring that penalty for the Matildas it's a iconic moment, right? And her staying in Australia, she is, one of the biggest names in the Liberty A-League, and her face is everywhere. The branding now around the Matildas, and everybody knows who Courtney Vine is. I'm
going to put it into these terms as well. My sister was showing my dad the photos. He recognised Courtney Vine. 50-year-old Lebanese man recognised Courtney Vine. And that tells you everything. The amount of eyes that we had on the Women's World Cup and the amount of recognition these girls received, they're now known. And that's one step in a million steps that we have to still take to get the game forward.
That's amazing. Like, with Courtney Vine and everything. But for me, going back to her club, Sydney have only considered 15 goals this season.
It's Jose Marina numbers.
Correct. But it's like, this is going arguably in one of the best histories. Like, Ante Juric, she's doing a brilliant job.
Yeah.
He's been there for 2-3 years now.
Longer now.
He's doing a brilliant job. And I think for me, they are the clear favourites. But it's been interesting, especially this last match day, how it is going to that final day.
Yeah.
That's very intriguing.
I want to point out one thing about Sydney FC in that midfield. I think Chauvet, Ray and Hawkesby have been absolutely immense. And I think ever since Hawkesby's come back, what they've been able to do, and for me, I don't know if you saw the interview on the weekend, I called Chauvet a Rolls Royce. Because if you sit there and watch her, she is like redefining the sixth position of women's football, because she's able to...
The Roger of the Liberty A-League.
She literally is the Roger of the Liberty A-League, because she's able to sit back and cover that back four, but at the same time, I think she played, I've got it here, about 13 progressive passes into the final third from her position.
Wow.
And when you look at it, she won 10 duels, 75 successful dribbles, had 73 touches of the ball. On top of those 13 passes, she made the most passes out of any Sydney player that game and ran herself into the ground to the point where she was still cramping walking outside the stadium. So that tells you a lot about her, and I'm sure you coached her at Western Sydney.
I did.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I did. She was at Western Sydney with us, and Margot's a fantastic girl. She's a great girl. She's got a great work ethic. She's, a very, very hard worker, and she's really hung in there. And at Sydney FC, it's not easy to get into a match day squad there, right? No. They've got a great squad. And obviously, Shay Holman was away with the young Matildas duties, which then allowed Margot to be able to step in, and other players being able to be reshuffled. And I think that's why Sydney has always had so much great success. It's because the depth that they have, you lose one player, you put another player in, and then it's always that fighting for their spots. And what you'd probably noticed is that even though the young Matildas have come back, is that Ante the next week didn't just put them all back in.
Yes. Yeah.
He's making them all sort of fight for their spot, which will be interesting today after their loss to Canberra in what he does in his next game.
On that point, we've got a massive Global Football Week in May.
Yeah.
For me, I don't see another option but to appoint him head coach of the Liberty A-League All-Stars. Would you agree? Do you think he's the only candidate? Or if so, do you reckon there's another candidate?
Bias aside.
I can't be biased. I definitely...
Catherine Cannuli stepping up.
Well, actually, here we go.
Can I nominate myself? I'm out of a job at the moment. No, I think he's definitely up there in terms of... if you're looking at names, he's definitely going to be one of those names up there. I think this season, to be honest, Ante has had to work his hardest. He's actually had to really, really coach that team and really put his head together and making sure that he could get the best out of his team. He hasn't been dealt a very good hand this season. I think he's done really, really well with what he's had to sort of come up against. He's had some major injuries at the beginning. He's lost, 6 or 7 players to young Matildas camps or tournaments, which is not easy. And he's really worked that team very well this season to be able to still be in the position that they are in at the moment. And
for me, he's kind of redefining women's football as we speak, because of the way he's kind of set this team out, especially during their resurgence post-December. Throwing, for example, Abby Lemon this week, I left back. I know in women's football they end up covering a lot of positions, and I've realised that a lot of wingers can play fullback and a lot of midfielders can kind of drop back where they need to. But throwing Abby Lemon at left back, given that she's right-footed, having her invert kind of playing that advanced of a tactic is working wonders for him. And he's able to throw on, and I found that last week, 6 of the 24 or 25 players in that squad are under 18 or 18 and younger.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think they've got maybe the second youngest team in the comp.
They've got a couple, I think, like Indiana, for example, I think is 15 or 16, Dos Santos. You got Talon Haniko who's come on. She's just turned 18. Casper's Holly's sister. She's 16. You know, and then there's, I think, you look at the midfield, which is the rock of that team. They average an age at about 21. Taylor Ray and Hawkesby, I think, are about 20 or 21 themselves. And Courtney Vine's probably one of the senior ones in there. She's 25.
It's still very young. Very young.
So,
which is still a baby, really.
That leads nicely onto our question. So, Kath, on the podcast, we've got a segment where we do like a build your dream midfield or build your dream attack or start bench sell. So, we've got one here, which is build your All-Stars midfield for the game in May against Arsenal Women's.
Oh, wow. You're putting me on the spot.
We're going to hand out a few whiteboards. Thomas.
Oh, wow.
Give yourself a minute to have a chat and think about it. Kath, do you want to give that to me?
Oh, that's yours. Yep.
It's yours.
Move that on.
That's fine.
Do you mind if you give us a marker, Abdul? Is there one spare one?
Marker?
Yeah. Spare one? Matthew?
We'll share.
We'll share. All right.
We'll share.
I'll go first because I've got mine.
You go first.
Abdul, you write yours?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is interesting.
Catherine's seen my writing. My writing's not the best, so if you can't understand, no worries.
There we go.
Thanks, mate.
No worries.
I've got mine.
Just want to check if this one's available. Bear with me.
Are we checking injury or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, they have to. Oh, that's right. They have to be available.
Yeah.
This one's not actually available at the moment, but apparently she's coming back.
I think I know their player you're talking about. I've never seen Abdul think so much.
Don't look at my work.
No, God, no.
Thomas is a cheater.
Catherine, like my motto to the girls before we walk out on a Sunday, anything to do to win. That's our motto before we walk out.
He would do anything to win.
All right, Abdul, should I go first?
Abdul, you okay? You writing the whole starting 11 or?
All right, there we go. I'm done. I just had to think of one. So.
You're going 1, 2, 3 or what are you doing?
No, we'll reveal one at a time.
All
right. So I've gone Chauvet at the 6. I've gone either Hawks.
Hang on. We said 3.
I couldn't decide.
No. We said 3.
See what I mean?
All right. I'll make it easier for you. There you go. Hawkesby, I've got Kidiak and Chauvet for me. I think you can't go wrong with that. They'll level out that.
I've got one, the same as yours. I'll go next because we'll leave the best to last because she's the guest. Tamika Yallop in the 6, Danielle Galich, and Chidiak for me. Galich for me, her quality just surpasses.
More than a Rolls Royce.
Yes, for me.
She is quality, young Galich. I've got Hawkesby, Yallop, and Lagazo in a rotating midfield.
Ooh.
So they can all, Hawkesby mainly as the 6, but they can all rotate around.
Do you see the TD coming out?
No, I do. It's
in
great.
A rotation.
It's crazy though because Hawkesby plays a lot higher for Sydney FC as well.
She does, but you know what? She's got, so these 3 would have the ability to be able to rotate around, so they can all. So you go on more attacking here than actually, because they all can attack, but they all can actually hold as well if need be.
Because you got to remember who you're playing as well. You got your Kim Littles. McCabe's been tucking in lately. On top of that,
Quality all over the pitch.
It's quality all over the pitch. But
before we move on, can I ask Tamika Yallop, is that purely for experience? Is that because that's why I've picked her?
Tamika Yallop, experience is one thing, but the other thing that Tamika gives you that a lot of players can't is her engines, her ability to be able to hold a midfield, but also progress forward. If you watched her play for Brisbane on the weekend, you can see that she can progress herself forward, but she can also hold a midfield, and she's like the playmaker or the key player in terms of, you will see the way that she guides her team around, the way that she sort of like a second coach on the field that helps the players.
She's
as
the
well.
captain of Brisbane, isn't she?
Yes. Okay. Oh no, sorry, Aisha Nori is.
Yeah. See, my only thing is that when it comes to who we're playing tactically, tactically. Don't you think someone like a Xiao Wei, given that she's able to just sit there and defend, because you can have Kim Little's similar to Hawkesby, to be honest with you, where they're 8s, but realistically they're that good they kind of shift up and almost become a 10, but still are that dominant and all over the pitch that they can kind of pressure the defense. I think Xiao Wei should get minutes.
She makes the squad for me. She makes the squad.
Hopefully. But I don't know. What I've seen from her this season, I think that's what they're going to need, because you got to remember who you're playing.
100%. It's going to be tough, coming up against an Arsenal team, which is one of those top teams in the world.
Like to hold the ball as well.
Exactly. Look, to be honest, if I was looking for an out-and-out 6 where we're looking at in terms of experience, you'd look at maybe a KK and at least Kellen Knight as well. Obviously, she's injured at the moment, but I think Shay Holman does a fantastic job for Sydney FC in terms of just playing purely that holding midfielder role. Me personally, I'm more of that attacking style coach. I don't really want just that pure, just that holder. I like my midfields to be able to rotate if they want to progress forward and they see that they do have space in front of them to be able to drive forward and get involved in the attack. That player will then go, and then another player will actually cover for them. But everybody's got their own different philosophy in the way they see football and what they see. But I think in terms of Shay Holman, in terms of her age and what she's been doing in this competition and what she's done for Sydney FC over the last couple of seasons, I think as an out-and-out 6, she's probably one of the best young talents that we've got.
Cool. Wow.
That's fair. Well, in terms of talent, we're going to move on to this Chelsea team that...
My club.
Your club, unfortunately. Even though...
Why I wear an Arsenal shirt? Catherine, I'll tell you off the podcast.
Dear God, that team is just... Emma Hayes has them playing some sort of...
Yeah, she is.
Her and Ante Juric must be like... They got some sort of WhatsApp group. Well, look, they've come into this game. They've won 15 out of their last 16 games in all competitions. And Manchester City had played the night before. They won 3-1 against Manchester United. So this game was a must-win, because they lose that game, they're 3 points behind Manchester City. Let's forget Arsenal; they're now 6 points behind the title race. But West Ham started quickly. Asayi, I don't want to say Asayi because there's a lot of Asayi in City. Asayi.
Mate, there's about 5 of them going past.
Unbeatable texture, my friend.
Oh, here we go.
So they had a quick chance within a minute. Unfortunately, it was a great cross, and West Ham went down that route where they were attacking them down the right and then finding that open overlap, whipping that cross in. Unfortunately, they just did not have a single shot on target all game.
Mate, Mackenzie Arnold was busy.
She was busy.
Mackenzie Arnold was busy.
But the next bit of play highlighted for me what's just amazing about Chelsea. The brand of football that they play, and I don't know if you guys saw the goal where, they took a touch inside, started at the pretty much through the left back. Bear with me. Liam Charles at the back. Laid it off to Nuskin, who then played it off to Lauren James. And I'm talking, this is all on the run, and this is them just knowing where to go and where to be. Lauren James then back heels it. And it was just beautiful. And Beaver Jones just scores it from there.
However, Hayashi had a goal ruled offside. That could have changed everything.
It wasn't offside.
Yeah, the referee,
Which lays off my next question to you.
Do not talk to me about VAR.
Technology, VAR, goal line technology, and women's football. Tell me about it.
Honestly, my personal views on VAR, I hate it. I think it takes out the natural part of football. But if we're going to have it in the men's game, I think we should have it in the women's game as well. I think if we're going to have it in the game, I think it's got to be equal across both, because we can't... we can't have it in the men's and then not have it in the women's. So.
On that point as well, I know he's very passionate about this. 5 substitutions on the bench. Why is there only 5 girls on the bench?
Why?
Yes. Is there? Do you know? Do you know a reason? Or
I don't.
Is that another one of your?
I don't know the reason why there's 5. Why they picked 5, but
it's interesting. Well, why can you only have 5 when on the men's? It seems like you can have a whole classroom. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true, because at the end
but
of
you still can only make certain amount
yes, correct.
substitutions.
Yeah, what kind of annoys me is you want to hold the same amount of competitions for the women's game, and then you look further into that with all the ACL injuries and
And
you
women
know,
are more prone. Women are more prone to that.
Scientifically, yeah, you know, they are more prone to certain injuries when the muscles do become overused. Expand the bench. You know, we're allowed 5 subs in the men's game with a bench of 8. Do the same for the women's game.
Sometimes more.
I think they did increase the number of substitutions. I think it was post-COVID.
Yeah, they did
add substitution numbers.
Yeah, but when we were at the Wanderers Senior FC game, was there only 5 named on the bench?
No, there's only 5 on the bench.
Yeah.
When you look at the team list, you only they only have 5 on the bench. And what happens if a keeper gets injured? Like at the end of the day, not everyone's gonna have the engine of you know, for example, Hawkesby or Chauvet. You're going to need to replace them. You need to replace your midfielders, your attackers, and majority of the time it is those players getting substituted. But then what happens if your goalkeeper gets injured or your centre back gets injured? You're kind of screwed.
For me though, because it is my club and I get a bit happy with the women's side, at least they're well compared to the men's. Could Chelsea pull off the quadruple?
Ooh.
It's a big call, I know.
I think they could. They could. Honestly, they have an unbelievable team. The talent that they have.
Sammy out.
Sammy's just she's a small part of that big pie, right? She's a phenomenal talent, but the talent that Chelsea has, and that's something that Emma Hayes has built there over the years, right? She's built an unbelievable club, an unbelievable foundation, and that's going to be big shoes to fill once she moves on to the USA national team as well. But people want to go there because you can see top players sitting on the bench. Their bench could come on and win games in the WSL hands down. They'd be still top 4 in the league just playing with the players on the bench.
Yeah.
In the B squad. Absolutely.
In the B squad. And that's why they win championships. That's why they win these leagues. They're so competitive in the Champions League because all the best players want to go there because not only, again, we spoke about standards earlier, your standards are getting driven because the squad training, the competitiveness in those training sessions are just on another level.
Yeah. And for example, that second goal kind of emphasizes that point. Cuthbert took it on a half volley. It was off a corner. She took it on a half volley. Mackenzie Arnold's a great keeper, an amazing keeper. She just couldn't do nothing about it. In the roof of the net. It was unsavable. But, you know, it's what Emma Hayes has created. You know, what would you take as a former coach yourself? What do you take out of that? And what do you see that she's done that's gone so well for her, to be honest?
I think her recruitment and the way that she goes after players and the type of players that fit her system and the way that she wants to play, I think that's been the most significant thing that I've seen with her. From what I've heard from players, her player management, the way she manages, you know, all these big name players. You got Lauren James, you got Sam Kerr, you got Cuthbert, you've got Fran Kirby. Like the list just goes on and goes on and goes on, and it wouldn't be easy to actually manage
a lot of personalities,
a group
a lot of egos.
and a group of superstars.
Yeah.
And especially now, given the way the women's game has just gone, you know, on a massive high, it would get harder and harder with that. But they all buy into what she's trying to output at the club. They all know that it's, you know, it's club first. It's about the badge. It's about being competitive on the world stage, and they just want to win things. And I think, you know, the culture that she's instilled within the club, and I think because she's been there from day one and she's built that culture and she's instilled, you know, the professionalism and she's built it from the ground up. I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm sure that players have, you know, the most respect for as well.
Yeah. And I just have to give a shout. Lauren James, man, she's gone from one level to another. Like, I'm realizing now, if she wants to go one way, you best believe that defender's going with her. She's that good.
She's a phenomenal player. For me, arguably, easily in the top 3 discussion for the Ballon d'Or. She's a phenomenal.
The girl's a freak. She's a freak. Like, you can't explain.
Well said.
Genetically, she is like for me. It must be a genetic thing because, like, it's just you don't see that even in the men's game. You don't see that where it's just like she's that freaking good. She made that back heel look so casual.
She's just a natural talent. Everything that she does just comes naturally to her, and you can see sometimes she looks like she's in slow-mo. Like she's like so slow in what she's doing, then all of a sudden just that change of speed or the way that she takes players on, and like you said, the way she just glides past players.
I read a great comparison, sorry to cut you off. she's the Serena Williams of football.
That was me last week.
Oh, fair play, fair play.
You guys quoting each other now?
We do.
You're trying to get more hits on your podcast?
Oh, mate,
That's why you're on, Catherine. Thank you.
Listen, another quote, I'll quote myself, as I told Margot Chauvet. If you put a dent in a Rolls Royce, you have to pay the excess.
Okay.
They tried to dent Margot Chauvet.
You're getting now near the dad jokes, just so you know.
Oh, I can start rolling them.
Click that one. That's amazing.
But I have to say, though, like, she's just... You know how, when you watch some women's footballers, it looks, awkward with some of them. You could tell they're kind of still learning to get their body, adjusted or around it. Lauren James doesn't have that. Lauren James is just physically... you can't kind of handle it.
Superior.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of young female footballers are still kind of growing into their body and kind of learning, and even with the passing and the turning and the turning of the hips when you're shooting type of, talking to two coaches. Lauren James is just so natural. Everything's just looks free.
Mastered it.
Like she's a master. But in terms of the other master and one player that I've kind of grown to love, Jess Park. Wow. Like Manchester City won 3-1 as we mentioned before.
Crack a game.
Very even though. The score's deceptive.
It is, but think about it. Think about this. Men's and women's cities have been smashing United for how long?
Yeah.
The men and women's side for how long? 4 or 5 years? What's your team in the EPL?
Can we skip this question?
Oh, it's United, isn't it?
Oh no. This is where
This is where we just all walk away. We'll just take away from the podcast.
hit record, delete the footage.
I'm gone.
They've had a few chances through Paris, through Gais, through Garcia.
And I'll point out a few stats as I usually like to do.
The stat man's coming back on.
15 shots apiece. There was 1 shot on target between both of them. 4% difference in completed passes. Both teams were forced to play more passes in their own half than in the attacking half, which was 40 and 41% respectively, attacking wise. So more than 50% of the ball was played in their own half. 1 tackle. 1 difference between the two teams, a 53 to 47% dual 1 rate to City, and 4% difference in successful dribbles when it came to both teams playing.
I think that game really showed how tactically the women's game can be. And it was like football is usually described as a chess game. You try to out chess the master.
Yeah.
Did you sort of see that, Catherine, as you were watching that game? They were so tactically par on par. And as they were trying to, let's say City was trying to get above United just stepped up their game, and vice versa. Did you sort of see that as you're watching as well?
The women's game has gone to another level on that side of things. If you rewind back to 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't see that. But the quality of coaches that we're seeing in the league now, obviously the quality of players that are coming through the league, and the WSL has just absolutely exploded. And with the investment, and to be fair, Manchester City have always had a massive investment in the women's game way before Manchester United. Yeah. And for me, it's really disappointing to see Manchester United be so far behind on the women's team compared to the amount of money that they spend on their men's team.
But they've also been pulled apart slowly. They lost to Alicia Russo last year. They lost. I think it was Marta right back. Like there was a few players that they lost, and Cascarino. Cascarino was another one that they lost. So they're slowly losing some of their best players. Mary Earps is on the move by the sounds of it as well. And then when you look at who you're left with, you got your Ella Toons,
that's really
Garcia on the left. That's about it.
And that's disappointing. Obviously, we don't know the ins and outs of what have gone on in the background, right? Yeah. But for me, when Alessia Russo moved to Arsenal, that for me is a massive stab in the heart.
That's the lifeblood. It's her and Ella Toon also had
besties. They're besties as well.
That would have cut deep into every Manchester United.
But there's always a reason why the player leaves, whether they're unhappy with the vision of the way the club is going, or financially Arsenal would have been obviously trying to pay a lot more money. So again, we don't know the ins and outs. We're only always speculating as fans, but it was a massive disappointment to lose someone of the quality of Alessia Russo.
Yeah, and for me, like my favourite player outside of Arsenal is Ella Toon. I'm telling you now, if Ella Toon moves to Arsenal, I'm packing my bags and I'm moving to England. But
Matthew, mate, you're the co-host. You mean something.
Just so you know, she's got a boyfriend, mate. So you're wasting your time.
Hey, not in that sense. Not that type of my favourite player. Actually, in terms of football and personality and all that.
Of course,
I'm a man of personality.
Of course.
No, look.
Enough about that. We're talking about football. We're back on.
Jess Park. I don't know whether it's the City mould but she's kind of becoming that Kevin De Bruyne style player because her ability on the ball, her runs into the box, even when she scored that first goal, which she took it in a stride, not even 30, 40 seconds later, she's doing that De Bruyne run where he just takes a stride and bolts down the side before he likes to cross it in.
Yeah.
The development's insane. And I think with her, especially over the last 6-7 weeks, she's taken a role further forward.
From the men's side, bleeds in from the ends, vice versa.
Yeah, and
it's the whole club for me.
Yeah, and similar to as we were saying before about Hawkesby, she kind of can play so deep yet so far forward that she's making that perfect box to box. That type of box to box player. Her own thing in that City squad. Considering Mary Fowler started that game as well, started on the right. There's a lot of young talent there. And what we've talked about previously is City don't necessarily have superstars. Not like Chelsea, not like Arsenal. They're building their own superstars. They're building a young team. There's a core. There's some senior players. You got your Greenwoods and your Kennedys at the back. But other than that, it is who it is. Khadija Shaw's coming to her own this season as well. So what are your thoughts on City's kind of progression as a team this season?
I think they need to look for something different. They've been in the competition for a little while now, and they've tasted a little bit of success. And I think sometimes you need to look outside the box in terms of how you're going to redo things. And sometimes you got to take a couple of steps back to take significant steps forward. And I think their end goal for them would be to win the league and be a lot more successful in the Champions League. But you're not going to get that overnight, and you're not going to get what Emma Hayes has built at Chelsea overnight either. It takes time, and what people don't realise is that Emma Hayes has been there for so many years. It just didn't happen for her overnight. It's been something that she's been building on, and that's something that Manchester City are obviously looking at investment. I know in terms of their facilities and the way that they treat the girls and the way that the girls get looked after is, second to none. And I think now it's just about everything else adding to what they're trying to build, adding to their foundations.
On that point, who wins it from here? Because obviously Arsenal slipped off. They've 6 points behind with 5 games to go. I think it's for me, Arsenal gone. Cut that smile. So
I never tipped Arsenal to begin with.
You are the guest, so you get to choose Chelsea or Man City. Who do you think from here?
Personally, I think Chelsea. Reason being is that because this is Emma Hayes' last season, I think the girls will really, really, really dig deep to make sure that they get it over the line for her.
Abs? No?
I'll stick with my tip. I've said Manchester City for the last 6 weeks.
All right.
I'm going to stick with that.
We'll come back to this.
We will. When the citizens, as they like to call themselves, will be lifting that title.
You can chop it up.
When Chelsea eventually win this, you're going to give me the money that you owe Catherine. I'll give it to her at training, all right? You understand me? Good.
Look, before we move on, I just want to ask, what's gone wrong with this Arsenal team? They won 3-1 on the weekend. But there's so many superstars in that team. It makes me wonder, where, why, what's gone wrong from your perspective or from how you've seen it? What do you think has been the problem?
I think it's just hard to manage big personalities and obviously big superstars. They've had a few key injuries as well, which doesn't help. So a change of personnel. And again, it's not easy to be able to manage that, not only from a coach's perspective, but from a player's perspective. And, different players are playing in different positions or people are injured. And I think that's always tough to sort of manage. And just because you've got the best players, it doesn't mean that you're going to get, instant success. That's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. And you hear Ange Postecoglou talk about it all the time. Even at Tottenham, he has the money to go and buy, the biggest players in the world, but he always said he wants to build a squad around, that harmony and having that culture. Because if you have, 15, 20 great superstars, how are you going to fit them all into that squad? How are you going to look after them? How are you going to keep them all happy? And that's a massive, massive job of the manager. And again, we speculate as fans and from this side of the things, but we don't really know what goes on, behind closed doors there. But I think the most important thing is that, Arsenal as a team obviously want success, and they've got plenty of good players to do that. And I'm sure on their side, they'll be very disappointed in where they're sitting right now in the league. Yeah,
look, I've heard a few things off the field, which I'm not going to delve into because, it's...
What's your source? No, joking.
Twitter.
Very, very reliable. Very reliable. Well done, tops.
But in terms of on the field, it's more so for me, it's not like we've got superstar players with big egos. Not in that sense. We have players that are the type that will dig you out of games even when you're not doing, or your Beth Meads, you've got your McCabe's, you've got your Leah Williamsons at the back. Even when you think about Alicia Russo, even though she's young, she's done it on the big stage. You look at Caitlin Ford, for example. And then we've signed these youngsters that want to come through, like your CUNY Crosses.
I think it's a project. Sorry to cut you off, but I think it's a project. I think it's very similar to what Kath was saying as well. It's like maybe you don't have that pulsating figure as a manager.
I think personally, for me, it's the manager. I think he hasn't in any way, shape or form got the best out of his team, because we look like there's games where we should be pumping the hell out of teams, yet we just give them a way in. And for me, he's the problem, because like I said, we have the players to get you out of trouble. And it's not just you've got the best player in the world. You've got players that are senior enough and that are experienced enough to know what they're doing there. For me, it's the level at the top, and I think he needs to be moved on and bring in possibly the next big thing, because you don't want to end up like United, where you start losing players, and before you know it, you're in 4th, 5th, 6th, and you're out of contention with everything.
Well, they did sign him on a multi-year deal, pretty recent, which is, for me, was pretty mind-blowing given that...
Surprising.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes at the end of the season, depending on where they finish and whether the club is happy with his performances.
We've got the Conti Cup still, so...
Plus 5 games to go, so we'll see what happens. Kath, the reason why we have you on, some would say, is we felt like there was no better guest to explain this next point, because you've been there, not from the 1700s, but...
Like, what are you trying to say, huh?
But you've been there since really the golden age and the start of women's football in Australia and the evolution of the women's game. And obviously, you're speaking off camera, you retired in 2014, permanently. And the explosion of the women's game sort of came after that. So I thought there was no better guest to get on than for you to give your overall view and your experiences, and to tell our listeners how the women's game has evolved. So Abdul's going to be a history teacher for about 2 to 3 minutes. Hopefully it doesn't take that long. And speak about roughly the associations and how that sort of started, and speak about the RAS, as you were saying. And then there's going to be about 3 or 4 big key questions that we want to ask you, and sort of your experiences and how that shaped your thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, sounds good?
Yeah.
No problem.
So I'm going to run through the whole.
It does.
Just real quick. So we're going to have a quick history lesson today.
Go.
Okay. So the first public match of association football between 2 women's teams occurred when North Brisbane defeated South Brisbane 2-0. And do you know when that was? 24th of September, 1921.
Long before I was born. Carry on.
North Brisbane was referred to as the Reds and South Brisbane was referred to as the Blues. And they were both kitted out in full football uniforms. Over 10,000 people attended the match. I think that's crazy. 100 years ago, 10,000 people.
Yeah.
But the women's football momentum began to pick up, and then it dropped off, because what happened? The FA came around and said, football is not for women. Obviously, boo.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So the FA argued that the game of football is quite unsuitable for women and ought not to be encouraged. They have since apologised. A committee developed in Australia also recommended that football is medically inappropriate for women to play, and encouraged females to instead participate in likes of swimming, rowing, cycling and horseback riding. Women's football would fall into relative obscurity for decades, and this is where the comment of women's football is 50 years behind comes from, because we didn't pick it up until
1974. There were regular women's games, football leagues established in most states. However, there was no national competition for clubs to aspire to. That all changed in August of the same year, with a campaigning of Dr. Oscar Maid of Perth and Pat O'Connor, that's my father, I'm joking, of Sydney to establish a national championship was realised. The team officials met to discuss the establishment of an organisation to promote, foster and manage women's football in Australia. And thus the Australian Women's Soccer Association was formed. Fast forward to 2003, and the AWSA, which had administered and developed the women's game in Australia for almost 30 years, was absorbed into the ASA, and to be known later as the Football Federation of Australia in 2004. In 2008, the W League was born, and fast forward to 2024, we have gone from 8 teams to a 12-team competition. From a second league thought to a fully functioning superstar field league. And ultimately, the young girls of Australia have something to aspire to.
Yeah.
What do you think of our research? First
history lesson, boys.
I thought, when we were writing out the script, I just thought that not many people know the proper background. A lot of people turn around and say, women's football is 50 years behind. We've got to tell the people why. And honestly, you think back to 1921, to have 10,000 people at a game back then, at a women's football game, it's crazy. They might not have all been there for the right reason, I might think, to be honest with you. But still, to think, 15, 18 years ago, you wouldn't have had 10,000 people. You would have barely had 2,000-3,000 at a stadium. And that's on a good day. But my question to you is, considering you played through the transitional period of the association, that being between 2000 and 2004, and then coming back into it when it was called the W League, how different was it back then? And what was some of the obstacles that you had to face back in the early 2000s, considering what the girls have to play with now?
Well, you're taking me back down memory lane here and making me use... it was very, very different to what it is today even. And again, I say this, we're in a great space in women's football right now, but we've still got so much more to achieve and so much more to get to, right? But back in those days, if we were to fly, we'd have to fly in and fly out on the same day. So if we'll go on to Queensland, we'd get up in the morning, get a plane, get there, bus to the stadium. You'd be basically eating on the side at a pub, if you're lucky, have something quickly to eat, get to the game. You got maybe about an hour and a half to get yourself ready, play the game, get back on the bus, get to the plane, get on the plane, eat something at the airport, and get home all in a day's work.
Win, loss or draw every single week.
Wow. Win, loss or draw, and I can tell you that wasn't just in the early days of back then. It was called. The Summer League. It was a Summer League series, the Ansett Summer Series, I think it was called back then. And obviously then there was the A League that came, or the W League at that point came in, and things slowly started to get better. And obviously the clubs were aligned. You had your Sydney FCs, you had at the time was Queensland Raw, not the Brisbane Raw. Central Coast Mariners were in there, but also being funded by, not the Central Coast Mariners at the time, and there was so many different, obviously, obstacles. And again, like even in those early days, we were still flying into, for instance, if we were flying to Perth, we'd be flying into Perth at maybe midnight, going to bed, eating pizza for dinner, going to the hotel room, again, getting up the next day, maybe hanging around, Perth City for a few hours, going to play, get back to the airport, sit around at the airport for maybe 4 or 5 hours because we were on the red eye home.
Sorry to cut, but how can they expect you to perform at that level when you're not even getting the minimum hours of sleep?
Correct me if I'm wrong. They just did not value that level. That's what it sounds like, because it just sounds like when you're dragging your kids around all day and just having to deal with them as the day goes.
Your father, Abdul?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay.
But that's the way you explained it to me. It's kind of like they're just dragging you along and just trying to get you out of the way.
I think the most important thing was that there was just no budget.
Yeah.
They were in the league, but the budget was just so minimal, and to be able to, play those games and to make it happen, it was like you got to fly in and fly out on the same day, and obviously you'd stay overnight.
Did they pay for the flights?
Yeah, everything was paid for. Everything was always paid for, which was fantastic. We'd get an allowance for food and lunches or dinners. If we weren't in a hotel sort of setting, when you're going in and out on the same day, you'd get, allowances. But they were some really, really tough days. And then, considering what we do now, when I was head coach of the Western Sydney Wanderers, it's 3 days. You go the night before. Sometimes we would stay, or majority of the times we would stay the night of the game to make sure that the players are fully rested, and then we're flying home the next day and making sure that the girls, are eating right, their recovery is right. You can do all your recovery straight after the game. You're not worrying about rushing out and getting on a plane and rushing off. And again, it all comes down to budgets and having those clubs that are willing to invest that money into their teams, again, which is something that now also the leagues and the PFA is a big supporter of, making sure that the quality and the standards of the league is getting higher and higher as we go on every year.
I think the right word there is consideration. There's a lot more consideration now for the women's game and the women's physical and mental health side of it. I'd imagine back then that your mental health, just having to do so much in a day and then try to focus on the win. I can't imagine being on that plane ride back with a loss, considering everything that you went through. So,
Abdul, there was no such thing as mental health back in those days. You didn't talk about that sort of stuff. You just were on the grind all the time. You got on the pitch, you did it. We didn't have, the physios and the doctors and everything that, a lot of the players have these days. They got access to. The staff that we would travel with would be very, very minimal. And again, like even these days in the Liberty A-League, the A-League women's travel with a lot less staff than the A-League men's. It's something that, we need to keep striving to keep raising those standards, and that's something that, the leagues is obviously working on, and the PFA is working strongly towards as well.
Sorry to cut you off before you say your thing, but that's amazing from what you sort of stated for your personal experience to now. The growth is immense, and hopefully we can continue that. The question I wanted to ask you was, as a TD, where I see you 4 to 5 times a week, how important is your role, not for Southern Districts, but as an example for fellow TDs, in ensuring and maintaining the pathways that feed these girls into the competition to aspire to be future Matildas?
It's massive. The role of a technical director these days, and this is one of the reasons why this year I stepped away from actually coaching a team, because the organisation and the making sure that the club is run in the right direction, and especially when you have high maintenance coaches like somebody that's sitting on the left side of me that takes up a lot of hours in my day and my weekend.
Positive.
She's got calendar spots like highlighted in yellow. Thomas blocked out.
She's not my favourite contact.
I feel like I just hit that on the spot.
You did. So no, but the role as a TD is huge now, and I'm very fortunate that I work for the Southern Districts Football Association, where that is my full-time role, where I can look after women's football in our region full-time, which is fantastic. Sorry.
That's good.
But it's nowhere near the amount of hours that you have to put into.
Yeah.
The hours that, there's a lot of TDs that are part-time that, maybe don't get to do as much as what I do. But yeah, it's not an easy job.
No.
You can't do this job unless you absolutely love it.
Yep.
Because the amount of hours that you spend not only on the pitch but away from the pitch, making sure the organisation and that the programming and then that the football is getting, displayed the way that you want it, and making sure that the girls are in a great environment, a healthy environment, a happy environment. And that's not easy. We've got over 100 players just in our SD Raiders football club, and then obviously over 2,000 players in the association side of things with young females, and making sure that the competitions are being run to the best of its abilities, and making sure that we've got girls coming back to play every year.
It's a massive behind the scenes, and I've been there, Abdul, not to the level that Catherine has, but I've been there and seen that. It's a massive level. When you put that into our other 8 associations that Western Sydney Wanderers just cover, because they cover 9.
Yeah.
So you put that 8 more, then you go into New South Wales, you combine that in Queensland, Victoria, Tasmania, Western Australia. It's like the roles that Catherine and fellow TDs go to is incredible.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And like, just taking in your experience, like a former Matilda, currently a technical director, former Western Sydney Wanderers coach, and then taking
player.
And player, and Sydney FC player.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair play. Fair play.
In terms of the next, let's just call it the next 10 years. I'm not going to say 20. In terms of the next 10 years, how important is it that on a technical level, that we develop the women's game to kind of take those new heights and not sort of emulate the men's game, but more so develop and trailblaze a way where you define this is women's football. This is the style of women's football that we want to play and we want to create, which will then allow, girls that are 8 and 9 and 10 over the next 10 years to develop into that style and kind of find that pathway and grow.
The most important thing is investment in the game.
Yeah.
You need to get the girls playing at a younger age and making sure that they start, when they're 5 or 6 years old. And the more you play the game and the longer you play for, the better your knowledge of the game becomes, the better you get technically, the better you get tactically. And that's just the way football is. The longer you're in it, and I always say, once you know how to play football and you understand it and you've got the technical ability, you'll be able to play it for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
right? So you'll be
never lose
90. You see all the oldies, at your family gatherings, you put a football out, and all my uncles and aunties are culprits of it. They'll just come out, they'll have a kick, they want to play, your 5v5 in the backyard. And
before you know it, Nonna's whipping out a rainbow flick.
Yeah. Every Christmas and Easter.
That's going to be me. I'm going to be that Nonna, nutty in my grandchildren. That's going to be me.
It's like trying to pick a 5-on-5, and the first person I'm picking Nonna.
Yeah. Absolutely. But we need to make sure that the investment in the game is upheld, and we need to make sure that we've got commercial sustainability and people getting behind the game, the women's game especially. But we need to get young females playing at a younger age. And I think another thing that we need to really knuckle down on is the affordability of playing football as well. So that's another thing that's probably not a can of worms that we want to open up tonight.
Trust me, we've had a whole, I'd say over the 17 weeks we've been here.
It's been an hour long.
Probably a bit more than that. Yeah. It just trickles into every conversation. Now, you can't go back but point at that.
It's investment, as Catherine was saying. It's simple as that. Catherine, the last question for me that I want to ask is, going back to a conversation we had off camera, your sort of playing days, early playing days, 2003, 2004, when you had that break, was that break forced because of the factors such as playing in Canberra, Australian Institute of Sport, and not having a established Matildas cap until later on, as you were saying? Is that why that break was forced for you personally, or was there something else, maybe behind the scenes factor?
I think for me, one of the major things was I had compartment syndrome, so I had to get both my legs operated at the time. Was around the Athens Olympics time, and it was a little bit sort of devastating. It was the first time that I'd dealt with a major setback, and I think my whole life revolved around football, and all I ever knew was football. I had nothing else that I ever wanted in my life but to be a footballer. And I think when that injury hit, I think it gave me time to sort of reflect and say, wow, when I was a young girl, I wanted to play for the Italian men's national team. That's who I thought I was going to go. I thought I was going to go play with
Del Piero
and Del Piero, and I was going to go to Italy and be I don't know what. And that was my dreams as a kid. But obviously, as you get older and you start to develop as a person and as a player, and you start to see what avenues you got. And back in those days, in the early 2000s, even though I was doing so well as a footballer here in Australia, and I was in the Matildas squads, and I was playing in young Matildas, and I was going away to Youth World Cups and all that. But women's football was nothing back then.
Yeah.
No one knew about women's football. Even if you rewind the clock 5 years ago, you got to schools and still people didn't know who the Matildas were. So you can see now where we were and where we are. And again, I always say where we want to be.
Yeah.
But it was just really, really heartbreaking as a young kid that my dream was I just wanted to be a professional footballer. And I always say this, and I continue to say this, and Kat Haddad's going to love this quote: you can't be what you can't see. And for me, I couldn't see any female footballer at the time making a career out of the game. And even our players, Cheryl Salisbury, Julie Murray back then, they were all working full time and still trying to play football at the highest level. So it was a difficult situation.
Crazy thing, her quote was, if you can see it, you can be it.
Oh, so now she's stealing my quotes. I'm going to have to make her pay some royalties.
I'll send her the invoice. Sorry.
Last question of the night.
Before we move on to the question, when you talk about your experience and in terms of only wanting to grow up and playing football, your generation, not to expose you or anything, they didn't have that, play with the boys. Especially being, 8, 9, 10, 11, you kind of just had to dream it and hope that one day that avenue opened up. Whereas I feel like, even the people in their late 20s, 26, 27, growing up, they would have been able to play with the boys team up until a certain age, and then they fell off football. But with yours, how tough was it, considering you just, you want something so badly, but you just know that
you didn't know the right avenues.
You didn't know the right avenue. You didn't know where to go, what to do. Now looking back at your illustrious career and what you've been able to do post-football, how do you reflect back on that?
I always talk about it was always about breaking down barriers. Like I played at Marconi for multiple years with the boys in the start of my career. I never played with girls until I got picked up with the Institute of Sport. And it was always so tough. I was the first girl ever to play in a boys' competition, and playing back then for the Marconi Stallions. They were one of the biggest teams in Australia, really. And it was hilarious. Like I'd be leading goal scorer one season, and they're like, oh, it was a fluke, you just got lucky. And then the second season I'd come back and do it again, So, which is for me is a massive achievement for me, and that's where a lot of my passion started. On the backfields of Marconi, and all the kids getting together, all our parents obviously being of the Italian background and hanging out at the club, and us playing on the backfields and the back streets, and that's where our passion for football started. And it wasn't until I got picked up, I was at one of my brother's football matches, and I was just kicking the ball at half time.
Yeah,
he was playing in the Premier League at the time, and I was just kicking a ball with my cousin at half time, and I was just pinging balls into the goal. And all of a sudden I get a letter in the mail that says, oh, we want to invite you down to the Institute of Sport. And can you come and do a training session? And it went through my brother's club at the time.
Didn't even go straight to you.
Yeah, it had to go through the club to get to me. And that's how I got identified into the system. And that's where it all started, where, my parents had to drive me to Valentine Sports, which was called Park Lee back in those days, and let me tell you, that was way before the M7. So from the old back of the crossroads, driving to Park Lee 4 days a week.
What you said is long before me and you were born, basically.
Yeah, way before you two were born. But that was a massive drive for my mum or my dad to take me.
How many nights per week was that?
I'm pretty sure it was like 4 nights a week back then, 4 or 5 nights.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, the sacrifices. Get home from school, pack a bag, pack dinner, pack your homework, get in the car, drive, get to training, do your 2-3 hours there, whatever you're doing, and then get in the car, have dinner, driving home. There was another girl that played out our way, and sometimes our parents would, carpool and help each other out. But it was some really, really, difficult times, and that's what we had to do if we wanted to be, a Matilda or represent our country and all those extras.
And just to think that now it's the complete opposite, where even going now they had the dads and daughters program, they encourage it's completely taken a backflip. There's encouragement now to play the women's game, and it's more than just football. Now
it's any women's sport.
You've got netball, you've got rugby league, that's expanding. There's 2 extra teams coming into the NRLW. With football itself, that's its own. Like there's now women's and there's men's or girls and boys teams, where we've come a long way. And it's tough hearing you talk about your experience back then, because like you just we could never, for example, relate in that sense.
Well,
because
plus we're not that good.
We're not that good. No, of course. But on a like even on a gender level, we're never going to be able to relate in that sense. The struggles that women go through compared to, what we could ever go through are 2 very different things. So like I could probably go on the weekend and put my sister in any sport like that she wanted to. Whereas back in the day, it's probably netball, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So I want to leave you with one last question. Because I think through a lot of the questions and answers, we've covered quite a bit of it without having to ask the questions. Overall, how far we've come, and you've talked about we still have a long way to go. Where do we still need to go outside of maybe investment, and even on a technical ability, growth, leagues, opportunities? Where do you see us? By say us, I mean women's football in 10 years, comparing it to the men's football of this world? And not just limiting it to this country in terms of the global game. Where do you see that in 5 to 10 years compared to the men's game and where it's at now?
I truly believe that the women's game can actually get on par, especially in Australia, in terms of the commercial revenue and the terms of getting the fans behind the games. I've seen the growth in the Liberty A League this season already. We spoke about the crowds that are coming out to, whether it be at Wanderers Football Park or Leichhardt Oval. There's been some really great support, and there's a lot of standalone fans there just for the women's game that maybe aren't, going to the men's game, but they're really enjoying going to the women's game. And I think if we really knuckle down into that commercial side of things and get the sponsors on board that we need, and the league starts to invest in all the extra 1%ers that we need to take the league to the next level.
Yeah.
Obviously, the most important one is next season when we're going to go the full home and away season, which is going to be a huge investment into the league. But I think in terms of getting people to the games, the growth in grassroots is going to be a key part of getting those kids and those families out to the Liberty A-League.
Well, the first step is the main event of that Friday is the women's game. So the women's game is main eventing that whole event.
Global Football Week.
Global Football Week is being main evented by women's football.
Who would have thought? Like, seriously, you got 2 Premier League teams coming out. One of them is coached by an Australian, might I add. That's rude. He's a Arsenal fan. And the other one is Newcastle United, the amount of history they have. And Arsenal women, led by the trio of the Matildas, are headlining the MCG. Who would have thought? I'm
going to put a statement out there. I think the Arsenal women's team is the most followed European team in this country.
It's
die hard, yes.
Die hard. No. I've seen a lot of fan accounts follow us.
But it's crazy, and just to think what one World Cup in this country has done. And for me personally, had it not been, I wish I was joking, had it not been for that women's game on the Friday, probably would have thought twice. I genuinely would have thought twice. So we're talking off camera, and I genuinely mean it when I say it. The women's league in this country for me is overtaking the men's league. I prefer to go out to those games. And as much as I've been used to the men's game, I think especially in this country that women's game is just quality. And you could tell quality football when you see it. And when you look at teams like, your victories, and you look at, Sydney FC, what the Wanderers have produced the last few weeks, Western United for most of this season, quality football, and it's not all the same brand. Every team now comes in, plays a different style of football, has a different set of players, and uses them to their ability. And credit most due to the pathways. And, you have a big part to play in that, and allowing players to kind of gather that opportunity.
So what Abs is saying is, what's your score prediction for that Friday?
We don't even have a team yet. We don't even know who's going to be playing in that game.
So the team that you submitted into the votes today, and hopefully they are judged on our votes. Sophie Harding, my striker, by the way.
I think it's partially judged on the fans' votes.
Well, I've spammed it 100 times, to be honest.
Okay. And that's probably why it's partial.
Fair play.
Yeah, all they say is Thomas.
Yeah, it's under names. Relax, I'm not that dumb. Do you reckon it's going to be a lot tighter than what people are making out to be? Do you reckon it's going to be maybe a 1 or 2 scoreline deficit?
I think it will be. I really think it's going to be a really good game. I was asked to put a team together to, put forward my thoughts as well. And when I was actually doing the team up of what they asked me to do, I was like, I actually had to leave out good players. I was like, this is actually really, really hard. It was actually harder than what I thought it would be. And it's not going to be an easy task for whoever has the final decision in picking the squad, because it's one, you need to obviously have the quality of players there that are going to have to play against a quality opponent, but you've also got to make sure that you put all the pieces of the puzzles together to make sure that the team's going to come together. And there's been talk that there will be a camp prior to the team to the game.
Yep.
So the girls will come together hopefully a week or so before to make sure that they gel and they get to know one another, and make sure that we're putting on the best display possible for not only the Australian fans, but for the world, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people picking up this game worldwide. You're
sounding very biased. You're sounding very unbiased and on the fence, Catherine. I've yet to hear a score prediction. What do you think?
If that 11 that you put down, you suggested, is the lineup against the Arsenal women's team, what's the scoreline going to be?
2-2.
2-2.
Ooh.
It's going to go to penalties.
That's okay.
Look for with all due respect to her goalkeeping ability, if the A-League women do go to penalties with Arsenal, I hope Zinsberger's in goal. I've been absolutely...
Not a biggest fan.
Not a biggest fan. But we won't go into that one.
Let's not go there.
Let's not go there. But, look, all in all, I think it's been a pleasure. It's honestly, like, in terms of where we started and and 17 weeks down the road, you've been one of the people on the list to bring onto the show. So it's great to finally have you on. Like I said, your illustrious career and your experience. It's great being able to share, your side and your perspective, and actually look at how far the women's game has gone. Plus, it was an all women's week this week. It's like with the football games and everything that we've covered. So all in all, thank you, Thomas.
Speaking on my personal behalf, when myself and Abdul started this in November, I headlined, obviously, I said, we need to get Catherine on. We need to get Catherine on. We need to get Catherine on. I'll be in my best behaviour. I won't speak. I'll be very quiet on the sidelines, as our friend can suggest over there. But it was an absolute must to get you on, and I'm just so glad it's come to fruition. It's maybe 17 weeks too late, some would say. But I just want to say a massive thank you from myself, from Abdul and everyone here at UBF. We did have something for you to sign, but unfortunately that didn't grow legs and make its way here, but we'll take that back for training. I'll get you to sign it if that's okay.
Lucky we get to see each other through the week.
My pleasure, honestly.
And hopefully it's not the last time either. Like, we'd love to have you back on one day, and I hope you've enjoyed your time as well.
For sure. Thank you, boys, and you guys are doing a great job. The podcast is awesome, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Catherine, thank you so much. And we have been UBF. I have been Thomas.
Before we go,
here we go. You could have wrote that early in the script. So
I only came up with this.
But go carry on.
From Thomas and I and the team at UBF as well, I just want to give a big thank you to the support and to the fans at UBF, because I think what we've seen over the last, especially the few weeks, going out to the games, going out to the women's games on social media, on Instagram, even going out doing our normal day things in our community, like for example my barber, Clipper Cartel, they follow, they watch. You want to help not just yourself grow. I want to see the community grow with us as well. So a big thank you to everyone that's supported us, and if you want to share a few kind words as well.
Yeah, I've actually been recognised, Catherine, not for my coaching abilities, but for the podcast. So that was nice. No, but we thank everyone for supporting, and it's an absolute honour to deliver this every Wednesday. This is one of the best days of the week for me, besides training and the game day. So I do look forward to this, and it's an absolute pleasure to be in this privileged position. And I'm sure you feel the same at Dub Zone as well, when you get the chance to give your thoughts on football. And let's be honest, my dream as a youngster was to become a commentator and a coach, something just involved with football. Because at 11 and 10, I realised I'm not going to cut it as a player, so I had to think of an alternative. And I'm just glad that I can have a possible future in employment with football and just be there and involved somewhere in that space.
Yeah.
Outro time, or am I allowed?
I think we can end it there.
Thank you, official editor. We have been UBF. I have been Thomas.
I've been Abs.
Special guest.
Your name?
Catherine Cannuli.
I love how she started there. Thank you, guys. Been a pleasure.
Ta.
Ciao. Beautiful.
Oh, God.